What is identity? We're going to think about this morning. What is my identity based upon? Who am I? What I am here for? These are the questions that have kept philosophers, psychiatrists, scientists, even today with artificial intelligence, everybody that studied this subject. And not only they've studied this subject, and it is still studied today, it's been studied for thousands and thousands of years. And we've seen progress in medical, we've seen progress in automotive, we've seen progress in aviation, but it seems to me that it is very hard to see progress when we talk about identity. It looks as if we are still very confused. And not only that, but everybody is having a go. Our favorite uncle at the Christmas dinner, when the Christmas dinner starts to be a bit too long, share happily his idea about identity and what he thinks about this particular subject. So there is a lot of research. We're not really sure what the research is helping us with. And we also have the possibility these days of having a voice, of being able to share our own truth. And that is quite confusing as we're going to discover. But these questions the reason why these questions are so important is because they are fundamental to us. They are fundamentals because they give us a sense of self-worth. And this is what everybody is out to find. But yet, every time someone is asking you, who are you? We are making such a great job at avoiding that particular question. And on Friday night, I was watching Good Will Hunting. We have a streaming platform. It means that at the click of a button, I have access to literally thousands upon thousands of films. And I was on my own, and I obviously choose to watch a film that I've already seen because all the others didn't seem to be really appealing. So you end up watching the films that you've already watched. But I remember enjoying that film, and I watched it again. And in that film, there is two main characters. So one character is Shane Maguire, that is played by Robbie Williams, and the other one, if you've seen the film, is Will Hunting, that is played by Matt Damon. And very quickly, Matt Damon is this very young, absolute genius kind of guy, self-taught genius kind of guy, and the part of the deal is having a lot of trouble with the police, and part of the deal is that he has to go and see a psychiatrist one sessions a week in order to stay out of trouble. And this psychiatrist, Shane Maguire, can't get through this guy. This guy is so intelligent that he just can't get through. And there was this particular scene when they are in the park together, and the guy has just cracked it. He's just cracked it because he can't outgo and he can't outpass this genius guy. He can't be more clever than this guy. But he's just realized, and he says this beautiful sentence in the middle of that discussion. He said, the reason why you don't want to talk about yourself, the reason why you don't want to tell me who you are and what you want to do, is because you are terrified of what you might say. So don't worry about the end. This is an American film, so there is a car, there's a sunset, there's a pretty girl, and at the end he said this famous sentence, I had to go see about a girl, this is the sentence that the psychiatrist used when he first met his wife. So just in case you were worried, this is an American film. Everything is fine in the end. He finds himself, and it is just this happy freedom kind of end of the film. So I just wanted to set the scene about what we're going to talk about it today. So I'm Olivier, I'm part of the leadership team here, and we've started a new series called Believe. And Ant last week have talked about who God say He is, and he went through the God is holy, God is healer, and God is Lord. And today I am picking up on the second part of that series, and it's God, who God says we are. And then we're gonna unpack this idea to help us understand the new identity that God has given us and God has given you when we become a Christian. So I've been thinking quite a lot about this idea of identity. So for weeks I was thinking about the importance of identity and so on. And I wanted to start with the most obvious one. You know, when you talk about your identity, the most obvious one is either your name or where you're from. And I'm just actually as a little test. Let's take a couple of seconds. If I were to ask you the question, who are you? Either if you're taking notes or mentally, what would be the things that come straight out of your mind? If I said, who are you? Just think about it for 2 seconds. I think that would be quite useful for the rest of the talk. Is that, who are you? What would come as the first five things out of that question? While you're thinking about that, keep that park in your mind, because we're gonna see how to relate to that question later on. But part of that question, someone has said, there's your name and there's your identity. So there's one piece of document that is very, very important when you're born. If we've got the slides coming up, it's the birth certificate. So out of everything you can think of, I was just thinking about birth certificate, and the crazy things about the birth certificate is the least appealing piece of document that you receive in your life. It's the most important piece of document, and then it's just a flimsy piece of paper that you give to the parents for a child, and you quickly realize that everything is derived from that piece of paper. So if you want a passport, you have to provide that piece of paper. If you want a driving license, you either show your passport or that passport is derived from that bit. And you can see that everywhere you look, bank account, driving license, everything is derived to that flimsy piece of paper that was given to your parents when you were born. And I think this is a good starting point, because the language of the Bible uses there is a lot of similarity in the Bible when we're talking about becoming a Christian. There is this idea of rebirth. So there's this idea of being a new creation, being rebirth as a spiritual individual, as a physical one. And there is also this idea of citizenship. So the Bible says that you're now a citizen of heaven, and we're going to unpack that as well. And then there's this idea of family of God. There is also this idea of the church being the bride. So there is that the same kind of ideas and the same kind of document. Even I was actually looking at that picture. There is a seal. There's always on official document. There is a seal on that document, and the Bible talks about the Holy Spirit being the seal and making that document or making that conversion real. So there is a real kind of a parallel that is happening in that sense. It is, as I said, it is a very powerful question, but we always struggle to answer that question. And when we're talking about creating new identities, obviously these days is even more complicated, because wherever you are, you can also create an image for yourself, or you can create an identity. So is your identity going to be the same one when you're writing an email, when you're posting something on the internet that obviously even if your identity is hidden, would you behave exactly the same way? When you're creating a profile on Instagram or Facebook or whatever, will you always have the same kind? Would you always be true to your identity, or will you create an identity to be accepted by the community or by the audience who's gonna look and read your messages? And the confusing things about these different types of identity, it is quite towering, because constantly you're not rooted into one identity, but you've got an identity for Sunday, you've got an identity for Monday, and then you're just at the end sort of becoming lost. And when someone is asking you the questions, who are you, then you've got these kind of collections of identity, and you're not too sure which one to go for. And culturally, there's also issue with identity. The reason I'm talking about identity this way is because I want to show how complex the idea is and how confusing this idea can be, and then proposing a different way. But you can think about identity when we went through the kind of I am such and such, I am British, I am French, I am German, and then you're moving on to a deeper part of that identity. There's two kinds of category that you can think of there. The first category is the, let's call it the more traditional kind of aspects of identity. So historically, if you lived in a village and your father has been the baker, and then your grandfather has been the baker, and the father of your grandfather has been a baker, when you're a boy and you're born in that family, guess what? The family, the community wants you to be a baker, you see. And then the poor guy, imagine if the guy is quite happily to be a baker, then that's fine. But if the guy is writing poetry all day long, you know is that there is going to be a clash there. There is going to be a clash, and for that particular person, you could just say, well, you've got one possibility, just to leave that community. But then the problem is you end up in another community that says, well, you don't belong to that community, so go back to your community, be a baker, and get on with it. So that is the kind of simplistic approach of that kind of identity, which is there is duty, there is honor, there is service of community. These kinds of things are important, and the way you realize that you've done a good job and that you're safe in your identity is when you are, in that instance, a good baker. If you are a good baker, your community is happy, then you've done a good job, then you know exactly where you stand. But the problem is, obviously, when the poor guy doesn't want to be a baker, that's one problem. That creates frustrations, that creates a waste of a life, because he feels like he'd never be able to be the person that he wanted to be. And it feels like the opposite of that is the kind of new Western Disney kind of idea of identity. The film I was thinking about when I was talking about this other type of identity, and I don't know if you relate to that film, but it's a Disney film, and I have to be careful when I pick a Disney films here, because there's so many girls in this church that I'm going to be in a really big trouble. So I'm not touching on Frozen. I'm not criticizing Frozen. I'm not criticizing the princesses and everything else. I just picked on Inside Out. So Inside Out is the story of that little girl, And the idea of the film really is that that little girl has a handful of emotions in her, and you could see throughout the films how these emotions are relating, and how the emotions of the parents and how the emotions of everybody else is reacting around her. And this is all very nice and all very funny. But the problem that you could see here is that that particular kid or this particular person are represented only about feelings. So the feelings that they're thinking about or they're talking about in the film is like fear, anger, joy, disgust, and sadness. So the problem here is if you build your identity with emotions only, it's, to me, feels like it's, I mean, the last thing I want to build my identity on and my life on is on feelings, because my feelings change on a regular basis, and you don't want to be around me at 10 to 12 in most days of the week, because 12 o'clock is lunch for me. So 10 to 12, no good talking to me about planning or holidays or anything else. Do not talk to me about this, because it's too close to lunchtime. So when you start basing everything on feelings, and then you're not talking about conscience, you're not talking about faith, you're not talking about something that actually rules these kind of emotions, then you end up, I think, in the same kind of trouble, different troubles, but same kind of trouble. So in this particular context, the trouble is that your feelings will constantly change, and then you will constantly want to be or be something different. And when you're something different, you regret that you've been that person at that time, and then you end up in a complete mess. And that is a serious thing, because what happens is, if you go down that route, you end up being for sale. What I mean by this is, if you're using a platform to talk to people, or if you're using the internet, or if you're using something, if you're not paying for it, you are the product. And I think I quite like to see it that way. If it's free, you are the product. You're not using a product, you are the product. So what happens is, if you are completely driven by emotions, then this is the perfect business case for the rest of the world, right? So what would happen there is that they will bombard you at 10 to 12, and I've seen it. I've used the Uber app, and I could tell you at 11:30, I'm receiving a message about, fancy ordering a takeaway. Oh, look, you could have a little pizza thing, so there's a 20% on pizza. Look, there's a 20% on a curry thing. And then, so you're becoming the product. And if you're only based this, you just go and buy. And you buy, and more you think it's going to make you feel better. And then you buy that pizza, then you feel bad because you had a pizza, and then you go down again. And then when you go down, there's another email that comes and say, fancy a spa day to make you feel better about it, or fancy losing weight, and you're buying even more stuff. And then you end up in this absolute crazy environment where it's just nothing is stable. And I know that I'm not a social media kind of person, but even for me, the only platform I use is LinkedIn, because I think it's a professional kind of, let's call it kind of Facebook. You've got colleagues, you're linked up with the colleagues, and they're talking about their work. So you're thinking, I don't want to stand here thinking I'm all righteous because I don't do any of that stuff. I get caught in the same thing as well, because every day, what's happening? Every day I know about, they don't call friends, they call colleagues, so it's easier, right? But I've got about, 500 connections of all the people that I've worked with, and some of them are friends, some of them are just people that I've met in one or two meetings. But what happened is that these 500 people, constantly, every day, there is one that's promoted. There's always one that gets something exciting to say about themselves, about the work they do. And what happened on a Monday morning when you start thinking, I've been banging my head on this project for 2 weeks and I still haven't got the result that I need. And then you have this feed of guys saying, I've been promoted as global head of the universe, whatever. They all have their titles, they all have their success completely bombarded at you, especially if you're not feeling great on that particular day. That is not super helpful. So we need, when we talk about identity, and I'm not even touching about, doing this when you're grown up, but doing this when you're 16, 14, and you've got access to this, right? That is even more complicated, and I've never experienced it. And to be honest, it's frightening to me to have these kind of constant possibilities of people to say, you need to be fit, you need to have more muscle, you need to be cleverer, you need to speak 3 languages, and then it's never the same guy, but you're bombarded with all this information about how you should be, how your identity should be. And everything is up for grab because there's money behind it, because you are the product. And every time they do that, it's not especially to help you out, but it's because they want to click, they want to sell you something, and it's becoming really, really complicated very, very quickly. So my hat's off to any youngsters out there who are trying to navigate through this maze of constant push for a particular identity. The other example that I think of, I don't know what it is, this particular preach, but it's films that came out of my mind. The kids of Kim and Brandon, I'll blame Brandon for it. They drag me onto the Maverick films, right? And they are the kind of films that I don't usually behave properly. So I've been banned from watching any kind of James Bond with my wife. She just refuses to watch any kind of James Bond with her anymore. And she's not joking. I've tried quite hard. I'm not allowed to. I just lose it, right? So I'm not allowed to do the James Bond things, and I'm sure the Top Gun was going to go badly as well, but actually it was okay. But there is this particular scene where, and I think it's probably why I liked it, is you imagine this kind of Top Gun guys, and I grew up with the Top Gun kind of films. I always wanted to have that motorbike and flying airplanes and be that kind of guy. But on the second one, obviously he's getting a lot older, and then there's this sentence where he's talking to his friend who's dying, and the friend is just saying, you just have to let go. You just have to let go of this kind of life. You're not 20 anymore. Just let go. And very emotional kind of scene with Tom Cruise, who's crying, and for a big man to cry on TV, it's a kind of a hard thing to do. Very, very touching, very moving. And he says, being a pilot is not what I am, is who I am. And that first struck me, because if your identity is what you do, then what happens when you're getting older and you cannot be a fighter pilot anymore? What happens when you're getting older and you're not this managing director anymore? You're just a guy who's playing golf on a Sunday, and nobody phones him, nobody sends him emails, and nobody wants to talk to him anymore. What happened when you're a father, when you're a mother, and then the kids running off to university and they're perfectly happy eating burgers and staying up late at night? Our identity there is just it can't be your identity be based on somebody else or on something. It needs to be something else. So I think I've just done that bit of introduction just to make sure that now absolutely every one of us is confused to death about what identity is and how difficult it is to find your identity. Whether you are a traditional kind of guy where you're thinking, I have to do what I have to do, or you are the new generations who say, I'm going to dig so deep inside of me that I'm going to find who I am. I think I've just made it quite clear that it's not as easy as that. And wherever camp you are in, it's going to be quite difficult to find your identity in there. And I think the reason why I'm excited about talking about identity is the voice of the church. Are we talking to people about identity? Are we talking about the amazing gospel truth that we have about our identity? And how are we using the language of identity to say, we have found something that you need. We are not on quicksands of emotions, or we have not built our life on a rock that is the wrong rock. We have very, very firm foundations of where our identity is based upon. And you need to hear that kind of news. And I think that's why I think it's so important to do this series, and it's so important to dig quite deep in the belief series, is because that will give us true arguments to talk to people about who we are and who we've become by following Jesus. So for looking at what the Bible says about identity, I've picked up 1 Peter 2:9-10. And 1 Peter 2:9-10 says this. But you are chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praise of him who called you out of the darkness into the wonderful light. Once you were not people, but now you are the people of God. Once you had not received mercy, but now you've received mercy. So I just want to quickly unpack that message and highlight a few passages. The first one is, we are chosen. And because we are chosen, we are accepted. And this idea of being accepted is fundamental. The reason why we buy the car we buy, the reason why we wear the clothes that we wear, the reason why we do pretty much everything is to gain acceptance. We don't just buy a car. We just want to be part of a club. We just want to portray a kind of success. We don't want to portray something that will reflect of our identity and will make us accepted by a particular people. So this idea of being chosen and this idea of being accepted is so freeing, because suddenly your starting point is, I'm not worried if at school I'm not picked on. I'm not worried if what people are thinking of, because I have been chosen and I am accepted. And that is the truth that is in the Bible. And Ephesians 1:4 said, not only I have issues, Ephesians 1:4, let me read it to you. For he chose us in him before the creation of the world to be holy and blameless in his sight in love. So he means that in Ephesians 1:9, he said, not only we have been chosen, we have actually been chosen before the creation. So you could almost see it as he chose us first, and then he created everything. That is the depth of what God has done. And during this year, during the 21 days of prayer, I decided to follow the Bible's Project, Bible in a year. I was not too keen on flipping back and forth with the Old and the New Testament, and I quite like, because they've got a nice list, number of days, and then they've got the videos that on a particular subject as a reference point. So it's easy to, when you're lost in Number or Exodus, you could just click on that video, get a quick refresher, and it works quite well. But I don't know what it is, but on the 1st of January, the idea of rereading Genesis didn't fill me with excitement. I don't know what it was, but I vividly remember that. And a kind of, here we go again, if you see what I mean, right? And I just had an amazing revelations on the creation bit. on the creation bit, when I stopped on the seventh day, I always thought of God saying, I need a bit of a rest, so I'm going to take the 7 days off, right? And I always understood Sabbath as, it's just a thing you do, you rest because God needed to rest, right? And this time, reading that passage, same passage again, I just thought, what a fool of God. The 7 days, for me now, is all about, I have created this world. I am breathing because I'm going to have to stop now and going to think about the next step. The next step is to bring Adam in the world. I have created this beautiful place. I'm about to flick the switch for the waters to run, for everything to come alive, and for Adam to arrive, right? And I just this idea of waiting by the cot when your wife is pregnant, and the anticipation of that new things coming in, and then saying, I haven't got a clue what's going to happen, and then in awe about this new baby who can come in. But then I thought, my word, this is so much more than that, because at this point, God knows exactly what's going to happen. When he pressed that button, not only he's chosen us, but when he pressed that button, he knows that this son is going to have to die on a cross. When he's on the seventh day, and he's all excited about creation, he's all excited about this new creation, he also knows that he's going to have to send his son to the cross, to die on the cross for that particular creation. And then everything came alive for this. So not only we have been chosen, we have been accepted. And the price for that acceptance and for the price that has been paid for this was known before the creation happened. Before we were chosen, God knew the price he had to pay for it. And that suddenly completely blew my mind. And then I looked about the creation, and I looked about other stories of made-up gods that create a temple and put themselves in a temple. But now God is creating all these wonderful things, and what did he put in the temple? He puts us in that temple. We are in the temple. It's not that God has decided, come and I'll be in a temple and I'm going to be no, he's just putting Adam. And what does he give to Adam? He gives him all the power to rule, and all the power to represent his image. I mean, what an amazing start for a 21 day of prayer, I can tell you. And that helped me on the acceptance bit. That helped me on I have been chosen. Later on in that verse, we are talking about, if we could go back a bit. We are talking about chosen. We're talking about royal priesthood. I've touched on that. There were priests in the Bible, plenty of them. There were kings in the Bible. And have a read on the book called Kings. You'll see they come in, they come out, they're good, they're bad, they get killed. They were good, hundreds and hundreds of kings. But Adam was the one who was a priest, i.e., don't see the priest like, the guy you dress up differently. I mean, we know we've got a pastor that has a tendency to dress up differently than any other one. And I don't think it's any religious kind of thing saying, I am set apart, therefore... No, he's not. It's just because it's just a weird sense of dressing. So this is not what we're talking about. But Adam is a priest. Priesthood means the kind of representation. I represent the image of God. That is the idea of the priesthood. And then the royal priesthood means that Adam is also the king. He rules over everything. He has complete control of the creation. God created, and he released that power, and he released the authority to this new creation, our amazing. Adam was the first one. The second one was Jesus. I know Paul is not here this morning. He gets quite excited when we talk about Melchizedek, but we won't do that this morning. But I've talked about it before. Jesus was not only a king, but he was a royal king, and he was also a priest. So Jesus was the other one in a story who had the complete representation of who God was and a complete control of complete control. So there was only two ones, but this image of God, this image of priesthood, how do you explain that? So I just thought about this. If you see that picture, could anyone tell me who that person is? Exactly. Well done. I know I would say you could be proud of yourself, but no, really, not really. He is just this amazing character. And when I asked the question, who that person is, you all said Winston Churchill, right? But it's not, right? It's a picture of Winston Churchill. And that's what I like this idea about image, right? Is imagine if I was doing what I'm supposed to be doing, if I was the person that God created me to be. I'm getting there. I am seeking that. But everyone, someone sees you or sees me, they would see God. They would see a representation of God, right? And that's the same kind of ideas. When you see that picture, you know that picture is not Winston Churchill. Well, his head is far too big to start with. And he's got no legs, and he's got no arms. So it can't be Winston Churchill. It's an image of Winston Churchill. And I think if that could help you to just, when we talk about the image of God, if that could help you, then that was worth the picture on the slide. Later on in the passage in Peter, we talked about the royal priesthood, and there is also this idea of you are holy. And this is an important one, right? I was talking about my Monday morning when I feel like things are not going the way they should be going, and I am not worthy, and what is going on, right? I go back to Jesus, and I said this to myself. I said, Galatians 2:20. I said, I have been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. The life I now live in the body, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. That's how we have this. Don't ask me how to explain this. But as he lives in me, and as I accepted him, I can have access to the holies of holies. I can have access to God because he lives in me and I live in him. He lives in me and I live in him. I have this amazing door that is open to me. The Bible talks about Jesus being the gate. As I accept him and as I accept him for me, for my life, I can go through that gate and I can be seen by God face to face. I can be in the holies of holies because he has paid the price, because he has done everything. I can have access to that. And all I need to do is to remind myself that he's done it so I can be holy. And we should not be afraid of saying we are holy, because when we live in him and when we stay close to him and when we are rooted in him, we were in the prayer meeting this morning, we were thinking about this psalm that says when we are rooted in the house of the Lord, we are in this place, and there's nothing unholy that can touch God. That you can't mix light and darkness. This is not possible. You have to be holy, and the only way you can be holy is by being in Christ. So we have that in terms of that identity. You see what I mean? Suddenly, when you're waking up and then you don't know if you're angry, if you're sad, or if there is this higher calling that says, this is who I am. I have been crucified with Christ, and it's no longer I who lives in me, but it's him. And that is a game changer. You now have a reference point. You're anchored in on the rock. You are the people of God. That is another one that is important, right? Because on a Monday morning, it is hard. When you say this sentence, it is even hard to believe it, right? So what do? You text. You WhatsApp the group. You WhatsApp people at church. You phone them. and he's saying, gosh, this morning I felt crap. Oh, gosh, I feel ashamed of feeling so crap. You know why? I should not be crap because I live in Christ and Christ lives in me. Why is it? And then you got a couple of guys praying, and suddenly instead of looking at you, you're looking at him. The other guys just pray, gives you a word of encouragement, and then suddenly you're back up, and you're praising him again. There is a wonderful book by Robert Mulholland. I wish he had an easier name. But I've talked about that book before. But it's all about spiritual transformation. And although it's not the topics of God people, there is one key part on what he says that is important, and I just wanted to read it to you again. The process of being transformed into the image of Christ in community with other believers for the sake of one another. For the sake of the other. It's just such a beautiful sentence, because the process of being transformed in the image of Christ is done in community with other believers. So you can't just it can't just be you and God, because if that's happened, you know what's going to happen. Suddenly, God is going to very quickly look exactly like you. That is the problem. If I spend too much time on my own with God, I am going to transform God, and God is not going to transform me. And that is the problem. So I need a community of believers to be with me and say, oh, you're not doing the right thing here. Oh, no. It doesn't work like this. And you're not just only doing it for yourself, but you're doing it for the sake of others. So this is the idea of being the people of God. God doesn't usually talk to individuals. He talks to his chosen people. He talks to his community. He talks to Israel. He talks to a community of people. And I think that is also super important, especially as a church, our responsibility as a church and as responsibility towards others. And then you received, the last bit is you receive mercy. Receiving that mercy is a life-changing moment. Receiving that mercy is just hard to accept. But when you do, it's just an amazing thing. In the Old Testament, you can see where I am at the moment. In the Old Testament, we're talking about the tabernacle, this tent-shaped kind of temple. And in there, you have what they call the mercy seat. And the mercy seat, it looks a little bit like this. So you've got the seraphim who's just protecting that place. But on the mercy seat, you pour the blood of the sacrifice on that mercy seat. And inside that mercy seat, you've got the Word of God. You've got the Ten Commandments. And the idea of that mercy seat is that all the sacrifice are poured upon that mercy seat. And you receive the mercy of God by doing this. And the best way I can explain it to you is that mercy seat now for us is the cross. That community of people has been extended. And now as Christian, that mercy seat where the blood of Christ, not your own blood, but the blood of Christ was shed on that cross. That is the mercy seat. That is the place when you come and receive mercy. And that is it's an amazing thing. And in order for us as a church to remember what that mercy seat or the cross is, what we do when we come together is we have communion. And when I was preparing for this, I just had this idea of communion that I've never experienced before. Do you know why, instead of this kind of faffing of organizations and things, could just have a video of a communion? A video of because communion is like that, right? It's just to remind ourselves what God has done for us. So just have a little video and let's just watch this. But it is not what is meant. Obviously, that would be completely silly, right? Because when you say remember, it's not the kind of remember as a vague thoughts, like remember when we went on holiday in 19 whatever, and then we did this. That is different because you've left this to the past, right? The remember that we're talking about is the remember, oh, by the way, you're in a lake. Do you remember how to swim? That is the remember that I'm talking about, right? It's not, yes, I can remember when I was swimming one day. No, you just, so how do I swim? And then you start swimming. And the taking the communion is exactly that. Is when we are coming together, we are taking bread, and that bread is the most common bread that you can find in any kind of supermarket. But that bread, like you and I, has been set apart and blessed by God. The reason why this bread is not magic in itself, it's been set apart and has been blessed by God. So we have been set apart, and we are taking part of that communion. We are involved in that communion when we are taking the bread. And then we take the wine, and that is the representation of that mercy that we have received when we receive the gift of God. So if you have to write one thing today, I'd just like you to write that particular thing. And then I invite Erica. Every good preach needs to have a great ending. So I just called Erica to do the ending. But if you could, please remember one thing out of all this. If you could just write it down. An identity is not something you can construct. An identity is given. An identity is given to you. You can't manufacture that identity. And you have to stop manufacturing that identity. All you have to do is to accept the identity that God has given to you. Like Abraham, like Paul, Jesus will give you a name, will give you your name. The name that you have wasn't given to you. You didn't choose your name. You didn't choose your place of birth. But God is going to give you a name, and God is going to give you a citizenship of heaven. And what does it mean? It means that now you're belonging to a new kingdom. And wherever you go, whether it is in Florence, or whether it is in Slough, or whether it is in High Wycombe, you are now ambassadors. And you know, when I was talking about that passport, what an amazing blessing we have, right? Because we were born on the right side of the fence. We didn't do nothing about it. We were just born on the right side of the fence. And with that little passport, I can go anywhere. And if I've got a problem in a particular country, I just rush into the embassy, sort my paper out, and that embassy is actually representing the country that I. So all the right that I've got here, I've got over there in that embassy. So it is not a joke. It is a very serious piece of document. And God is saying, now you are an ambassador. You are an ambassador to the kingdom of heaven. You are now becoming royal priests. You're representing my image and my power in that country. And when the guys are coming out in Florence, they are ambassadors of heaven in there. What an amazing thing. Not just to go there and to come back. No. Wherever you are, whether it is next door or whether it is in Florence, you are now ambassadors. So you do not choose your identity. They said the identity is given to you. All you have to do is to accept that.